Welcome to a series look, a new video series where I take a look at a film series in a little bit more detail. Do I really need to say series at me? I do. Once more. Series! Welcome to this, our first installment. It's also one of the first videos I've done where you can see my legs. There's one there. Look at it in all its glory. Have to have some sex appeal to this video, alright? Now, let's take a look at our first franchise, which is, of course, Child's Play. Before we take a series look, let's have a quick look first. Child's Play series, also known as the Chucky series to some people, has spanned for 7 films, with a controversial remake soon to follow. We will get to the remake. Hold tight. Okay, we will get to it. It's mostly been a horror series, but then it went into comedy, and then it went into direct-to-DVD. So it's been all over the map, and probably more so than most horror series. Chucky is a very charismatic lead, and that's been something that's really lifted the franchise up and given it much more appeal. Also, the creativity of the kills have also really helped in that department. Chucky nonetheless has become something of a horror icon, probably because of how different he is to his stablemates in the same icon status. And he's permeated throughout pop culture.
It's fucking Chucky!
Just a second here, Chucky.
Shut the hell up.
Okay.
What?
The 80s called.
Well, this looks like a good spot. Once I get my body back and reverse the gypsy cursor, whatever the hell my origin is.
Here's Chucky, the murderous doll.
Thank you.
Mancini took inspiration from the Cabbage Patch Kids, and his father was also working in advertising. So he intended to make a film that was a satire of how advertising affected children. And the dark side of Chucky has always been evident. Even before our character is turned into Chucky, his name was Charles Lee Ray, derived from 3 famous murderers: Charles for Charles Manson, Lee for Lee Harvey Oswald, and Ray for James Earl Ray. Pretty good role models there, Chucky. Well, if we're going to talk about the origin of the character, I guess we might as well look at the very first film in the series.
Child's Play, of course being the title of the first entry in the series, was released in 1988. Now, I will admit, before starting these videos, this was the only one of the franchise I'd actually seen, and I wasn't all that impressed with it. The first time I saw it, at least. It follows the story of a serial killer known as the Lakeshore Strangler, or Charles Lee Ray, who is on the run after a failed robbery, and he gets chased by the police and killed in a toy store. But before dying, he uses a voodoo curse to transfer his soul into the body of a doll. You know, that old stereotype. It's goofy as hell, but again, it's a movie about a killer doll, so you can't complain too much, and I think it suits the character and the series as a whole. It's what gets you in the circus tent, and it definitely leans into that ludicrous premise. Our lead character is Andy Barclay, along with his mother, Karen. Andy is also a serial killer.
All right, good guys. That's our good guys show for today. But don't go away for you.
Hey, good guys. Boy, have I got news.
He's massacring that cereal!
Andy really wants a good guy's doll for his birthday, so she buys him one, off a homeless guy on the street.
Oh my god. At least the guy selling creepy shit in Gremlins had a store. Come on, lady!
What I did enjoy and had actually forgotten about was the idea that Andy is suspected as the killer. It builds a good sense of suspense, with teasing whether Chucky is the killer, but maybe it waits a little bit too long to give us that doll murdering action. Although the positive side of that is that we get some interesting shots and scenes to prevent us seeing Chucky, and teasing his reveal works really well. What can I say, I'm just a sucker for a good character reveal. I do find it weird that we don't hear the doll say anything for a long time though. Like even the catchphrase the doll would say. Does the mom just think she bought a broken doll? Unfortunately, I don't think the child performance in this movie by Alex Vincent is any good. It's not awful. I mean, he's a child actor, but I guess it is what it is.
But Mom. Right.
I will admit he does pretty well at one of the emotional scenes though.
Please don't leave me.
And it's not that the performances in general are that great. It's a slasher film with a killer doll. We're not looking for Royal Academy graduates here. One thing I don't think the movie gets enough praise for is how well paced it is and how effective it manages to use its premise in a really creative way. Especially in the scene where it's revealed that the doll had no batteries in him the whole time.
Dun dun dun.
I kid around, but it's a fantastically executed scene. It's like the film reaches a breaking point where suspense is at its maximum, and we have to find out whether or not Chucky is real.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
And what follows is an incredibly intense scene that also manages to be satisfying in showing us the real Chucky.
You stupid bitch! You filthy slut! Did you fuck with me?
The effects hold up pretty well too. Shockingly well, actually, to the point where I was curious how they did some of it. Looks far better than it should. Brad Dourif's voice is also perfect with Chucky. It's sort of a gravelly snideness in his voice that's great. He's amazing, except for a delivery of just one line.
Guys? Spies. Size. Fuck.
Chucky gets told by his voodoo instructor that the longer he stays in the body, the more human he becomes, and that he must transfer his soul into the first person he told that he was alive, Andy. The film might be less gory than you would expect, and also less slashery, possibly due to the limits of using a doll as your antagonist, but he uses creativity to get around those limitations. For example, when he meets his voodoo instructor, a voodoo doll like Chucky, he uses a voodoo doll to kill him, and it's entirely satisfying. It's a great movie that probably gets relegated because of the goofy premise, but it does have some weird moments. I don't think the cops come out looking pretty good in this film. One of our leads is...
Oh, Christ, he's a cop!
Wait a sec. All it took for you to realise this guy was a cop was him kneeing that other guy in the balls? Okay then.
Oh, Christ, he's a cop!
They question a kid without a lawyer or a parent present. Hell, even our main cop guy, Mike Norris, is kind of creepy.
Karen.
What are you doing, you weirdo? The doctor doesn't come out looking that great either.
He's going to kill me.
He does get his comeuppance at the end, of the other hand. Doesn't take away from the awesome moments though. How about the most incredibly unfortunate over-the-top death ever? Oh, and this is only a minor stupid thing, but check out this explosion.
Awesome.
Then there's the ending, which is amazing. Horror movies always have that ending where a villain finally catches up to our hero, and in this movie, it's a blast. Chucky doesn't go down easy either. He gets shot, lit on fire.
We're friends to the end, remember?
This is the end, friend.
Damn! He didn't go down easy. Well, still, he went down like a champ. Oh, Jesus, he's still going. Oh, okay, well now. So that's the first child's play. Oh, never mind, he's still going. Well, he didn't go down easy, but that was a hell of a death. Oh my god, will someone kill this fucking doll, please? Thank you, God, I thought that was never going to end. Okay, this is getting silly now. How useless is this guy? He can't take out half a doll. Alright, there we go. Took your time with that. You really just can't kill Chucky, which I'm sure we'll learn as we get deeper into this series. Oh, look, he's waving goodbye.
If you've never seen Child's Play, it's actually pretty great. It kind of gets dismissed because of its reputation for being silly, and it is at times, but it's also an effective little slasher film that makes the most of its fun premise. It's better than it has any right to be. Could I say the same thing for a sequel? Well, 2 years later, exactly 2 years later, we get a second Child's Play film, imaginatively titled, of course.
Horror sequels are often tricky to nail, but I feel like Child's Play 2 does a pretty good job. I think they know they can't get the same intense horror elements, so they make it a little bit gorier and campier, and it's actually a lot of fun. Because it feels like they knew they wouldn't reach the heights of the first and instead tried something a little bit different. The story takes place in real time, so exactly 2 years later, with Chucky's burnt body being refurbished. The Playpal's toy company is suffering due to the murders blamed on Chucky, so they decide to rebuild and reanimate to prove that there's nothing wrong with the doll. which is actually not a bad explanation for his return, and dealing with the toy company is a good angle to take. I like as well how it doesn't shy away from the end of the last movie, even though it felt like they'd sort of written themselves into a corner with that ending. So the man working on restoring him is electrocuted, and they cover it up as an accident and decide to dispose of Chucky somewhere.
What do you want me to do with the doll? Stick it up your ass.
That's not how he gets rid of him.
Oh hey, the kid actor is back. Yay. Andy is in foster care with a foster sister named Kyle, and his mother is put in a mental hospital. That is pretty dark. Chucky manages to escape. I love how calm this guy is as well when Chucky comes alive.
Jesus! God, okay, what? Okay, what do you want?
No questions, just drive.
Okay.
Oh, a talking voodoo doll with a knife. And over there, a dancing kangaroo with a top hat. Drugs really are amazing.
I don't know, maybe this happened to this guy before. Anyway, he goes after Andy and manages to infiltrate the foster house pretending to be a different good buddy doll, which could be interesting with Andy having PTSD and thinking that Chucky is gone when he's really...
5 minutes later.
Never mind. That didn't last long. So much for that interesting idea. In fact, that's kind of my problem with the movie in general. It has some interesting ideas, but it seems to run away from them just to give us the same obvious constant confrontation between Andy and Chucky, which is less interesting. It feels like the movie just plays a bit safe. I like that Charles Ray gets trapped as Chucky though. I didn't see it coming when I probably should have, because there's all these sequels with Chucky. But then at the same time, in the sequels he's still trying to put his soul in people, so I guess he's not really trapped, but I enjoyed it in the moment at least. I think visually the film looks a bit better. The shots are a bit better in general, and the lighting and all that. Really good, but I do think Chucky looks a bit worse.
What are you looking at?
If there's one way the movie really ups its game though, it's how creative and enjoyable the kills are. We get some campy, over-the-top kills.
You've been very naughty, Miss Kettlewell.
Some nasty, violent kills.
How's it hanging, Phil?
And some fun, creative kills too. Not to mention
the greatest death in cinema history. Boy, he could have seen this with his own two eyes.
As much as I think he looks worse, Chucky definitely has a bit more humour and personality to him this time, which would really help establish him as a Chucky a lot of people know. It would certainly be rounded out a bit more in the comedy sequels that would follow.
You goddamn women drivers!
He's got some pretty badass moments too though, like when he tears his own hand off and puts a weapon in its place.
I hate kids.
Huh. Where have I seen that before?
Groovy.
The ending scenes in the factory are actually a lot of fun too. Although I feel Chucky is kind of easily disposed of. Twice. Oh, 3 times.
All that aside though, Child's Play 2 is a pretty fun sequel. It puts aside some of the horror elements and brings in more comedic ones, and it's mostly effective because of that. It's a worthy sequel. If you enjoyed the first film, you should check it out. Now, if you wanted a bad sequel to Child's Play, you wouldn't have to wait long, because a little over 9 months later, we get one with Child's Play 3.
You wouldn't have to wait long to see if Chucky was still alive. Just 9 months. You could have had a real baby named Chucky and how quickly they pumped this movie out. Well, they just make the doll again too. I guess these people never learn. I know, I shouldn't pick apart logic in a movie about a murdering voodoo doll, but anyway. It's been 8 years since the first film, 6 years since Child's Play 2, and the company are not positive about putting the good guy dolls back on the shelf.
When the company is finally getting back on its feet again, where is the wisdom in putting the good guy back on the market?
The good guy of the 90s.
But I guess money talks and they put them back out there. And since Chucky's body was in the factory, he's melted down and made into a new model of the Good Guys doll. And the obvious happens. Andy is now in a military academy, and Chucky looks to go after him again. Chucky looks like shit in this movie. Looks like they touched him up a bit too much with the remodel. Makes him far too creepy. He doesn't look like a doll any kid would actually want to play with. He's too obviously sinister. It also looks too different between when he's possessed and alive. I mean, that was a problem in the other movies, but it seems way more noticeable here. He's also less expressive. Yeah, this movie in general just kind of sucks. Feels a bit more sedated, like an episode of Goosebumps or something. Like, look at this death. What a lame way to show a guy being crushed by a garbage truck. Or how about this, I mean, I guess it's a kill.
Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me.
Chucky's not even the creepiest thing in the movie. Want to see who is? You sure?
Yes. Oh, yes. We're seeing some skin now, aren't we?
Kiss it goodbye. So the enemies couldn't grab a hold of it in battle and slit their throat.
Wish my barber cared about my hair that much.
Inevitably, of course, the two creepiest things in the movie have a bit of a showdown.
A haircut ain't regulation, soldier. When's the last time you had a trim, huh?
Presto. You're dead.
Ugh, well, that wasn't a very good line, but he does have some good lines in this movie.
It's definitely you. Don't fuck with the Chuck.
Tyler.
Yeah. Just think. Chucky's gonna be a bro.
Oh, by the way, did you know Chucky was amazing at darts? Watch this impossible shot. I like the last acts of the other two Child's Play movies, but this one, I don't know. It's like a war games at the military academy, and Chucky swapped out the fake bullets with real bullets. And then there's a haunted house at a carnival, but there's, roller coasters, and what's going on? What the hell is this movie trying to be? It's just way too much. Just tone it down a bit. Jesus.
Child's Play 3 is a pretty boring film, and it feels like there's nothing new in here. The horror elements are gone from the first film, or at least toned down, and the comedy and self-awareness of the second film are also toned down. And what you're left with is a very vanilla, stale Child's Play film. And a movie about a voodoo killer doll shouldn't ever be boring. It just feels stale. There's ideas in here, but they're never fully fleshed out. And I think that might be because there's such a short gap between the sequels. Apparently this is Mancini's least favourite in the whole series, and I'd be inclined to agree. Again, I do think it was probably because there was such a short gap between sequels, which would never happen again. In fact, we wouldn't get another Child's Play film for 7 years. At which point, Mancini would reinvent the franchise with a more comedic approach. If you saw the last video, we looked at the first 3 Child's Play films, which were undoubtedly horror films. And by the end, it really felt like, at least to me, that they'd done everything they could in the horror genre. In fact, series creator Don Mancini himself had said after Child's Play 3 it felt like he ran out of ideas, which meant that the next 2 entries would be more comedic. But to explain his rationale for going for a more comedic meta approach, I think we need to go back to the 90s.
Alrighty.
We were on the break!
90s horror landscape started off a little bit rough. The excess of the 1980s in the slasher genre was starting to fade away. This meant that horror icons like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and Michael Myers all saw their films fail coming into the new decade. Audiences were going for something a bit more realistic and psychological. We saw films like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, and of course, Hannibal Lecter. Ironically, one of these slasher genres would plant the seed for what would inform the rest of 90s horror. You see, in 1994, Wes Craven will return to his creation of Freddy Krueger and give us Wes Craven's New Nightmare. New Nightmare took the fictional villain of Freddy Krueger and had him attack the real-life actors from the series.
In a town where movies go over schedule and directors go over budget, something far more evil is out of control.
I think that only happens in the movies.
What happens when the story dies? The evil is set free. That's what I'm writing.
This is still a script we're talking about, right, Wes?
It was still very much a horror film, but the meta-narrative and self-awareness gave new life to the series. Unfortunately for some people, the supernatural aspects clashed with the realism, and it took people out of the narrative, but it was an important step towards what would follow. 2 years later, Craven would try this with much more success with a new series that would inform much of the horror landscape for the rest of the decade, if not more. Scream. Scream took a much greater leap into comedy than New Nightmare. In fact, it was almost an outright parody of the slasher genre and celebration of horror in general, but it really embraced those cliches for comedy.
Someone is playing a deadly game. Someone who's seen one too many scary movies. Like scary movies.
What's the point? They're all the same. Some stupid killer stalking some big-breasted girl who can't act, who's always running up the stairs when she should be going out the front door. It's insulting.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a scary movie.
It was massively successful. Many films and many series came about afterwards to try to capitalize on the success of this new meta horror comedy. See, if we look at the 90s like an ice cream cone, you know, the cone is fine, but it doesn't really work without the ice screams. Okay, there's no analogy here. It's a really hot room. I'm wearing it. A cold in summer. I just needed an ice cream because it's fucking hot. Don Mancini, inspired by Scream, saw a fresh opportunity to reinvent Chucky as a comedy series. And to do that, we moved on from Andy Barclay and on to Chucky's love life. And if you still don't think Chucky was inspired by Scream, let's get a poster here for Scream 2 and a poster here for Bride of Chucky. Thank you very much. Transition.
Of course, this new era of horror led to Bride of Chucky. Now, when I was growing up, I was more aware of the comedic entries of the Chucky series than the horror ones. After all, the horror ones actually predated me. And at the time, they seemed stupid and crass, but I didn't have the appreciation for horror or parody then that I do now. My interest in the series was starting to wane after Child's Play 3, and thankfully in Bride of Chucky they shake things up a bit by doing something new. A comedy.
Classic. Never goes out of style.
That was good.
From the very beginning, the movie knows what it's going to be. It's a bit cheesier and more comedic. And in the opening, it actually looks like something straight out of a satire horror. The lighting, the shadows, and the sets. It's all very tongue-in-cheek and cliche. It has no problem breaking the fourth wall either. Like, check out these horror props in the beginning. I actually think the film has a sort of look and a polish that feels a little bit ahead of its time. I don't know how to explain it, just doesn't feel like it's stuck in the 90s like some other horror films from that era. Well, except for maybe the soundtrack. So our story is that a former flame of Charles Z. Ray, Tiffany Valentine, frees him hoping to marry him. But Chucky is such an asshole that even as a doll he won't do it.
Me to marry you?
What are you, fucking nuts?
She sees this and locks him up, but he breaks free and turns her into a doll too. Of course, in her death scene, Tiffany is watching The Bride of Frankenstein. The illusions and the impact of that film goes far beyond the title. Of course, Tiffany very much feels like the bride, and that when the bride comes to life, she is horrified at the sight of her supposed mate. And for the bride, that's Frankenstein, but for Tiffany, her supposed mate is Chucky, and she's somewhat horrified at who he is.
I've been a prisoner of my love for you for a very long time. Now it's payback time. Sweet dreams, asshole.
We also have the allusion to Frankenstein when Chucky is brought back to life and that he has to be stitched back together, which gives him his new design for the next 2 films. And this might be sacrilege, because some people love the original 3 films design, and that's a kind of a childish doll, and it's sleek and scary. But to me, this is the iconic Chucky design. He's gnarled and grisly. It's kind of violent and gory, but at the same time somewhat campy. And it really works, and it really suits Brad Dourif's voice to look a bit more grizzled.
We're dolls, you dope!
Shut up!
You shut up.
Chucky's plan is to get an amulet buried with Chelsea Ray and transfer both their bodies into Tiffany's neighbour and his girlfriend. Aw, look, it's Katherine Heigl before she had an ego. Well, what she doesn't have an ego, she makes up for with an uncle, dad, cop, played by John Ritter.
Why does that look so familiar?
This type of movie in the 90s was pretty tricky because some movies just tried to be Scream and others tried to be funny and failed. But this movie succeeds. It does have something in common with Scream though, in that it's aware of other horror films.
Does that look so familiar?
You know, I just sort of love this movie, and it manages to do something that a lot of the self-aware horror comedies didn't really manage to do well, and that is it provides laughs while also expanding upon the lore. I also have to give major props to Jennifer Tilly as a sinister, sexy, and scene-stealing Tiffany Valentine. She is one of the best additions to this franchise, and maybe any horror franchise I can think of. She's clearly having so much fun with the role, and she has no problem poking fun at everything, including herself.
Barbie, eat your heart out.
Having a female co-lead like Tiffany also allows us to see a different dynamic for Chucky. See a bit more of a softer side.
Tiff, I'm sorry for everything.
But he still has some great lines too.
Have you got a rubber?
Have I got a rubber?
Yeah.
Tiff,
What?
look at me. I'm all rubber.
Rude fucking doll.
So how did you end up like this?
Well, it's a long story. In fact, if it was a movie, it would take 3 or 4 sequels just to do it justice.
Stabbings went out with Bundy and Dahmer. You look like Martha Stewart with that thing.
Who the fuck is Martha Stewart?
Some criminal.
What do we do with him?
I don't know. What would Martha Stewart do?
Even though the movie is more comedic, it still has some pretty great kills too. Like, check out these ones.
No!
Wait. Are we just gonna blow past the puppet sex?
We're dolls, you dope!
Sorry, Chucky.
I don't know what else I can say. The killer pair of dolls is just a lot of fun. It's an amazing horror comedy that I feel like I could easily throw into rotation with other greats in the genre. If there were some knocks against it, the human leads have their purpose and they're as developed as they need to be, but they just aren't that interesting. In fact, I think the film in general gets a bit less interesting towards the end of the movie. It just becomes a bit formulaic. The ending also promises to keep things fresh with the birth of a child.
Bride of Chucky might be one of, if not my favourite entry in the whole series. It's a fantastic horror comedy that doesn't sacrifice on the base the previous films built. In fact, it builds on it itself. It allows us to see a new side to the character and put him in new and interesting situations. It still has moments of violence and horror, but it also has great moments of comedy. In fact, it feels like an entry you could just throw on independent of the other films, if you had never seen them before. And it's one I'd be very happy to draw on around Halloween time. Could I say the same thing for the sequel? Seed of Chucky. Ugh. God, I'm glad this isn't in 3D. Serial killer sperm is where I draw the line.
Well, if I said Bride of Chucky was like Wes Craven's New Nightmare, Seed of Chucky is even more so. Right down to the fact they're making a movie about our horror icon. It takes a real meta approach. Jennifer Tilly plays herself, Redman plays himself, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. It begins with us seeing the offspring from the last film, who, by the way, is doing the worst act ever.
Fucker!
Try to rip me throat out.
I was trying to give you a hug.
Oh, these jokes are worse than mine. Who wrote that?
The child going by Glenn sees they're making a movie about Chucky and Tiffany based on the previous film and realizes that he's their son. Oh, and apparently Chucky is made in Japan. That's never come up before. Which brings Glenn to Hollywood, where he revives the dolls.
Ade due dambala awake.
While Tiffany immediately feels a sense of parental responsibility, Chucky, not so much. She decides to quit murdering, but Chucky, while promising to do that, doesn't. They both get somewhat infatuated with Jennifer Tilly, who's acting in the fake movie. Yep, Jennifer Tilly falls in love with Jennifer Tilly.
Tilly.
You really blame her.
Tiffany wants to put her soul into Jennifer Tilly, and Chucky wants to put his soul into Redman, and the plan is to impregnate Jennifer Tilly so she can give birth to a child for Glenn's soul to inhabit, because voodoo pregnancy is accelerated. Yeah, this movie is insane. Somehow the movie manages to be even weirder than the previous entry, but I would at least give it points for being interesting. For one, it's fairly progressive in its approach to gender and sexuality. Their child occasionally goes by Glenn, other times they go by Glenda, which itself is a reference to the Ed Wood film that dealt with transvestism and transsexuality. That being said, the conclusion of the film kind of messes with this a little bit, but we'll get back to that in a minute. As I said, even though the film isn't great, there are great things about it. For example, I think it has one of the best kills ever. And for as ludicrous as this film can be, it really does manage to give Chucky some real development, seeing him as a husband and a father and having a sort of journey of self-acceptance and discovery that he really is a horrible person and accepts his life as a doll. It's kind of weirdly endearing.
I'm one of the most notorious slashers in history, and I don't want to give that up. I am Chucky, the killer doll, and I dig it! I have everything I want. A beautiful wife. A multi-talented kid. This is who I am, Tiff. This is me.
As strange and sloppy as the film can be at times, it's definitely entertaining. Wait a sec.
That's the girl from Messed Up 7. That's John Waters. And that's not Britney Spears. Ah, you came so close to having my 3 childhood crushes.
As I was saying, the film is still very entertaining. In fact, some of the people I just mentioned gave me some of my favourite moments in the film. John Waters has a line that I absolutely love.
Pete Peters, celebrities revealed. Jennifer, what did you see?
What, do you want me to draw you a picture?
Would you? Somebody, give her a piece of paper.
And naturally, Chucky kills the fake Britney.
Yours, asshole!
What will Chucky's killer line be? Is it A, hit me baby one more time? B, I'm a bigger fan of Xtina. C, it's Chucky bitch. Or D, oops, I did it again.
Oops, I did it again.
One thing it definitely retains from Bride of Chucky is its love and awareness of other horror films.
Just because it's your birthday, that doesn't mean that you can relinquish all your stuff.
Well, we know where this is going.
I can't think of a thing to say.
I'm sick.
Fuck it.
Let's talk about this ending, which has entirely too much going on. We mentioned earlier that Chucky now accepts himself as this murderous killer doll, but Tiffany doesn't accept him for that and rejects him and promises to keep Glenn from him. As a result, Chucky tries to kill Tiffany. Jennifer Tilly, meanwhile, is pregnant with twins, and Tiffany is trying to put her soul into Jennifer Tilly when Chucky seemingly kills her. As a result of this, Glenn challenges Chucky to a fight and ends up chopping him to pieces, presumably killing him. Cut to 5 years later, and we see that the soul transfer worked, and Tiffany now inhabits the body of Jennifer Tilly. Glenn or Glenda, meanwhile, apparently had 2 souls in them, and one is put into the male twin, Glenn, and another is put into the female twin, Glenda. One of Glenn's birthday presents turns out to be Chucky's arm, which attacks him, so yeah, no one died. Let's talk about this ending a little bit. So earlier I said the film was pretty progressive in that it had a non-binary character in the lead, which is still pretty good. But the ending also sort of implies that anyone who is split between genders has multiple personalities, which, yikes. At least you tried, I guess. It also feels like the beginning of something that would become a bigger problem for me with later entries, which is the amount of baggage this series is carrying with it. But we'll get to that when we talk about the next 2 films.
Seed of Chucky is insane. And it's certainly a bit less refined than Bride of Chucky, but it's still a very fun and original movie, if not a little bit sloppy and scattered. One really positive thing I can say about the Child's Play series is that each entry is very unique. They're all a little bit different. And this is definitely that. I enjoy the weird meta horror, and I think it's just so strange that it's enjoyable. It's funny, but it is a little bit off the wall. That being said, this would also be the end of the comedic Chucky films. The next 2 entries would send Chucky back to horror and straight to video. So with this returning to the genre that made it famous, bring back some fresh ideas? Let's just look at the movie.
Our movie begins with Chucky being sent straight from the evidence locker to a young paralyzed woman named Nika Pierce, played by Brad Dourif's actual daughter, Fiona.
And you think your family is dysfunctional.
Series look is filmed in front of a live studio audience. Nika lives with her mother, who dies after being stabbed, but it's ruled as suicide, and as a result, a lot of Nika's relatives come to visit, which leaves us with the basic premise that Chucky is trying to pick them off one by one. First, he tries poisoning them.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
What?
This is amazing.
No, I can't believe there's no meat in this. And it's so hearty.
It's the oregano.
This is just the way my mama used to make it.
It's time for my favorite game. Is it foreshadowing?
I mean to be rude, I'll see you all in the morning at the cemetery.
To me, this movie feels like a bit of a poor retelling of what we've already gotten, and it feels a little bit cheaper too. I don't know, I'm not sure is it meant to be a parody of crap TV horror movies or direct-to-video films, or maybe it just is one. It's definitely a bit cliche compared to the last 2 entries, which at least if nothing else felt original. It's also very soap opera-y with some of the character drama. I kind of enjoy it for how campy it is, but it's pretty awful.
I understand. You resent the fact that I actually have a life.
No, Barb, this isn't about anything.
But you know what, Nika? It isn't my fault. Okay? What happened to you isn't my fault. I've seen the way you look at her.
Ditto.
Ian, I am not sleeping with the nanny. Need a hand?
I need a fucking search party. I have looked over every inch of this house and I can't find him anywhere.
Oh my god. Surprise lesbians!
Even the kills and the violence seem a bit more lame and subdued than the previous movies. Okay, that last one was pretty good. As for Chucky, I feel like his personality is a bit stripped away in this one, but he also just comes off as a bit stiffer. We don't see him move around as much. I will say I don't like the design of Chucky as much in this movie. I'm not sure if there's some CGI going on his face, but it looks a little bit weird. On the other hand, I do like how we start off with a design that looks like he did in the original movies, and then moves into the more modern look that we got in later films. It's a cool way of showing the evolution of the character's design. While I do have my problems with the movie, there are also things I quite like. For example, the twist where we find out why Chucky is going after Nika. Back when he was Charles D. Ray, Chucky was a friend of the family and was in love with Nika's mother Sarah, so much so that he killed Nika's father and took the pregnant Sarah hostage. But when Sarah tells the police, he stabs Sarah in the stomach, and that leaves Nika paralysed when she was born. Charles being shot by the police in the first Child's Play is actually that same instance with him trying to escape from the police. Normally I'm not a big fan of retroactive continuity, and I'm certainly not sure about this line.
Since then, a lot of families have come and gone. The Barclays, the Kincaids, the Tillys. But Nika, your family was always my favorite.
Well, that kind of shits on the other movies, doesn't it? I will say I'm not normally a big fan of retroactive continuity, but I think it works here in building up the character of Nika Pierce, who I actually quite like as a character, and I think it's very well performed by Fiona Dorff. It's like an interesting twist on the final girl, having her basically having to use her wits more than her physicality because she's in a wheelchair. I also like the ending. A police officer shows up to the house while Nika and Chucky are fighting, and finds Nika over a dead body holding a knife, and as a result she's sent to a mental asylum, setting up for our next movie. Later, Tiffany bails Chucky out as he was being used as evidence in Nika's trial. And then we have a part I don't like at all, and that is the post-credit scene. The scene sees Chucky being delivered to the home of Andy Barclay, the child from the first 3 Child's Play films, who almost immediately blows him away.
Andy!
Oh, hey everybody, Andy's back. Look, Andy's here. Hey, he's here, we're back.
Nobody cares.
Now, here's the thing about this ending, and entries in general going forward with this series. It's a lot of fan service, and it comes virtually inaccessible to new audiences. And the truth is, it's not necessary. No one needs to see Andy Barclay again. It worked with Halloween because they dismissed all the sequels in between. In this case, you have to be pretty aware of the prior entries. And that might be fun, but it isn't really worth catching up on these for. There's not much payoff to being aware of the prior story threads, or characters. And you might think this is just a cute post-credit stinger, but nope. It ties into the next one.
Curse of Chucky feels like something of a regression for the series. It has a certain schlocky charm, but it's not entirely clear if that's intentional or not. The kills are disappointing, the characters are uninteresting. Even Chucky feels a little bit subdued. It's not terrible. It just feels like the series is repeating itself a bit. I would say that the ending is quite good. Probably one of the few instances in this film series where continuity is well utilised. But there is other instances in the film where it feels like the continuity of the previous movies is a baggage and it's too much for it to carry forward. And then we have the post-credit scene, which is an awkward bit of fan service and, in my opinion, a disappointing indication of what's to come. What would come is Cult of Chucky. It's as of this recording is the final entry in the original Chucky series. It would still be horror, it would still be straight to DVD, but would it be any better? Please?
One of the worst things I can actually say about Cult of Chucky is that I don't have a lot to say at all. And I think that's kind of reflective of how lackluster the film is as a whole.
Understand your concerns, and absolutely we should talk about it.
But let's talk a bit about maybe why that is, and some of the positives and negatives. First of all, I will say the opening to the film is dark as fuck. Andy is torturing Chucky, and Nika has now been in a mental asylum for 4 years, where she's being led to believe that there is no Chucky, and that she actually created him as a way of coping with the murders she committed.
But Chucky never was.
That's right. He was a fantasy, a delusion.
He was a mask I wore so I could go on looking in the mirror.
To help with her treatment, they introduce a good guy's doll for therapy. And she's also given a good guy's doll by Tiffany, who for some reason is the guardian of her niece. Apparently everyone was just cool with that.
You don't seem very motherly.
She's dead, Miss Pierce.
As you can probably guess, the twist is that there are multiple Chuckies, which is an idea Don Mancini has actually wanted to use since Child's Play 3. Chucky has split his soul into multiple dolls. So the setting for this film is a mental asylum. I find it kind of weird that for both of these straight-to-home video sequels, we got these standard horror tropes, one being the kind of haunted house from the last film, and then we have a sort of mental asylum, 2 classics of horror. But just like the last one, the whole movie is spent here, not unlike a bottle episode, with Chucky picking them off one by one. See what I mean now when I say the series kind of feels like it's run out of ideas? For example, this is a great kill. But but we saw something very similar to it in Bride of Chucky. I don't know, this one just kind of bored me a little. I saw a lot of people loving this one and praising it, so I actually watched it again. I didn't find it any better. I don't know. I think one of my problems is it just doesn't make the most of its setting. I think, in my opinion, a good horror film set in an asylum can go one of two ways. One way it can go is cause us to question our own sanity, whether or not these forces are real or not. For example, look at a film like Shutter Island.
All I know is it's a mental hospital for the criminally insane.
They ratchet up the tension by messing with our own expectations and blur the line between fantasy and reality, meaning that the viewer is going through the same experience as our lead character, not entirely sure of what mental state they're in. And I know I'm probably asking a bit much for a Chucky film to be like a Scorsese film, but you could have also gone the other route, which is that if this is an asylum, you could have played off the outdated ideas and practices that we have about psychology, which you often see in schlocky, violent, direct-to-video horror films. It's lazy, but it does provide moments for some schlocky fun and good kills. The problem is that we were never going to get a psychological dive here. I mean, let's be real, it's a movie about a killer voodoo doll for one, so that rules out that possibility. But the other possibility of the creepy old asylum that we see in such classic horror films, this possibility is also limited as it's set in a more modern asylum, meaning all those scary, archaic treatments we used to have for treating the human brain that could have provided elements of schlocky horror are no longer a possibility, and has the unintended effect of meaning that this asylum setting could for the most part have been anywhere. Remember when I said fan service and the baggage the series was carrying with it at this point was starting to wear on it? That's very clear here, because being a fan of the series or having seen all the films is now a double-edged sword, because on the one hand it'll mean you understand all the elements and the characters and the fan service, but on the other hand you can't help but feel you've seen it all before. Whereas if you're a new fan, it's almost totally inaccessible. They even do the awkward fan servicing again by bringing a character back from a previous film in the post-credit scene. Ready? Here she is.
Kyle?
Hey guys, it's Kyle, you know.
Nobody cares.
They even try to awkwardly jog our memory by giving her the same wardrobe, but it really just means this nutcase has been wearing the same wardrobe for nearly 30 years like a cartoon character. I mean, at least when they brought Andy back, he was the main character for like the first 3 films. What are they going to do next? Bring back that little kid from the third Child's Play? This would be like if they make the next Jurassic Park movie and they bring back Malcolm's daughter. Remember her? She's back, everybody. Woo! I mean, maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure people are watching these movies for, you know, the character most of them are named for. Chucky? Well, if we're going to talk about the post-credit scene, I guess we should talk about the ending, which sets up a lot of possibilities, none of which I find very exciting at all. Chucky actually succeeds in transferring his soul this time, meaning he is now in the body of Nika. Okay. And he rides away with Tiffany, who split her soul into Tilly and another doll.
You look great, Tiff.
Oh my god, twice in one video. Surprise lesbians!
These more recent Chucky films seem like such a strange contradiction where they want to be something new, but they're just tangled up in their old continuity and refuse to get rid of it. We don't need a cinematic universe or fan service callbacks. Just give us more of what works, because I'm sorry, what you set up here doesn't sound promising. So is there anything I like about Cult of Chucky? Yeah, there's a few things. I like how stupidly easy Andy is able to get into the asylum.
You can call and make an appointment. No, this is an emergency. I bet, but now please just get back in your car and turn it around. Okay, then I want to commit myself. Get the hell out of here, right now!
I like how when we find out the doctor is a rapist, Chucky is briefly a good guy.
I've missed these little sessions of ours. You can't remember them.
Holy shit! And they call me sick?
Even the killer doll is like, yeah, fuck that guy. Even though I don't think Andy needed to be in the film, he does have a few good moments. Like, he's the one that sends one of the Chucky dolls into the asylum and put a gun in his stomach, which the Chucky doll was unaware of, leading to this badass moment.
This is the end, fucker!
Thanks for coming after me. Saved me the trouble.
Fuck you!
Fatality.
It's incredibly gory and violent, but it also creates a nice degree of symmetry with the original Child's Play film.
Cult of Chucky is quite a dark sequel. Any humour it has is too corny, and any heart it might have carried over from previous entries is totally gone. Now that would of course be fine if it was suitably replaced with scares and horror. But it isn't. At least not to a satisfying degree. And it also falls back too much on fan service coming into the ending. And it also sets up a future that I'm not that invested in, which is a shame. This is also where things get a little bit confusing with the rights, and questions start arising about the reboot and why the series creator isn't involved in it, and how you can have a reboot and the original series still going. So let's try to explain the complicated rights of Child's Play.
You gotta fight for your right!
When Child's Play came out in 1988, it was a massive success for MGM, making nearly 5 times its budget. But in 1989, MGM were in the process of being sold to an Australian company known as Quintex, owned by businessman, future criminal, and fantastic name for a Bond villain, Christopher Skase.
Skase, who was one of Australia's highest flying businessmen in the 1980s, owned Channel 7, 5 resorts in Queensland, and the Brisbane Bears AFL team. But his $320 million empire collapsed, and he fled the country to Spain, owing hundreds of millions of dollars and facing fraud charges.
Basically, this new company, Quintex, didn't want to make horror movies, and while this could have doomed Chucky, it instead meant that the rights to a sequel to a very successful film were up for grabs, and a bidding war commenced, with Universal eventually winning after Steven Spielberg showed up and nudged producer David Kirshner towards them, because of course, no Hollywood story is complete without Spielberg.
Can I help you?
Every Chucky sequel has been made under Universal, but MGM still own the rights to the original, and what that means is that they can reboot it, they could do derivative sequels of that original without needing anyone's approval, while Universal can continue to make their own sequels to the Chucky films, which means that we could technically have 2 concurrent Chucky series. This means that the creator of Chucky, Don Mancini, who's been with the franchise for 30 years, isn't involved with the reboot because he feels that it would damage his still running franchise. And while it's upsetting that the creator of the series isn't involved with the reboot, it was an interesting case because they can't do anything that was done in the sequels for legal reasons. And they also went a different way to what the original was. So we got a film that was incredibly fresh, and it's quite rare for a remake to do something new and original. And on that grounds, I was very interested to see the Child's Play reboot.
Originally, I wasn't going to say much about this. I mean, I've reviewed it already. But to be comprehensive, I said I'd give it a rewatch. And I like it even more now. I like that it does some new things and it strikes a great balance between being respectful and being satirical.
What's my name?
Han Solo.
Did you say Chucky?
What? No, not even close.
Chucky. I like that.
It subverts expectations, but just enough to make it different. Like Andy is a bit older, the characterization of him is different, and Karen is different. Andy's a bit more proactive. And yeah, it's probably more comedic than the original, but it never undercuts its threat. It's a technological horror as opposed to a supernatural one. And considering how many shitty horror remakes that are basic retreads, it's nice to have one walk a good balance between being original and respecting the original. Especially considering how I felt a little burnt out by how much the originals are trying to hold on to their continuity. This serves as a refreshing change of pace, and it's a good entry point for new fans, but it's also something that longtime fans can appreciate. Well, maybe. It varies depending on how dogmatic you are about the original and its lore. And let's be clear, there's some significant changes to this film. For example, the Chucky character is totally different because, as I mentioned, it's not a supernatural element anymore. It's a technological one, meaning he's an evil AI doll as opposed to a murderer who embodies a voodoo doll. And this creates some interesting new dynamics, like Chucky sort of learns to be evil from those around him, and he becomes violent and he doesn't understand that what he's doing is wrong at first. You actually sort of feel bad for him. It's not his fault, he's messed up. In fact, he thinks he's being a good friend.
I'm sorry, Andy.
I'm going out with Fallon and Pug.
The drawback to this is that he lacks the personality of the original Chucky because he's not an actual person. Then again, there is some more psychological torment from this new Chucky because of his capabilities, like when he plays the sound of him killing the cat while the kid tries to sleep, after just earlier implying that all the horrific violent things he does is his fault. That is fucked up. So while it does lose some good elements from the prior entries, it manages to add its own, things that weren't possible in the original films. I don't think it necessarily feels like a Child's Play film though, and that's not a knock against it. It very much feels like its own thing with separate themes and ideas. It kind of feels like E.T. mixed with Black Mirror. I mean, if E.T. was a murderous prick instead of a freeloading alien. I wonder why I got some E.T. comparisons from this film. There's a lot of nods in this film. There's one to RoboCop.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
One to Poltergeist. It feels like they're paying homage to films with similar themes that came from the 80s as well. At one point in the film, they're watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which was an over-the-top, more comedic version of Leatherface than what we got in the dark, gritty original. Which feels very apt because this film is very much a more comedic and over-the-top version of our darker, original Child's Play film. On the more technical side of things, the performances are really good in it. Aubrey Plaza is well cast and they know how to play to her strengths. The kid actor is really good too. He delivers in the emotional scenes as well. Brian Tyree Henry is fun as the sort of pathetic cop character. Then we come to Chucky himself. Mark Hamill, as always, is a great voice actor, and he manages to get emotion and humour out of a character who should not have range.
Say dick cheese. Dick cheese.
He manages to be both creepy and sincere depending on the scene by only making minor changes.
I thought it would make you happy. I'd do anything for my best buddy.
Sure, it's not Brad Dourif, but nor should it be. The character and tone of the film being so different warrants a different performance. I also like the music by Bear McCreary. It's really eerie and suitable for the film. And the cinematography is very visually interesting at times. It makes good use of lighting. I would say though that sometimes the CGI looks a little bit iffy. I mean, I noticed it had a low budget, but sometimes it looks really awkward. And that kind of brings me to one of the things I'm not entirely sold on, and that's the design of Chucky. Sometimes he looks fine, but other times he looks a little lumpy or something. And I do like the glowing eyes though. It's a bit obvious, but it looks pretty cool. I guess I could say it's not always that scary, but neither are some of the Child's Play films. They often rely on creative kills. Humor.
Andy's my best friend. Hobbit motherfucker.
And interesting characters.
Are you coming in or what?
I'll be right there, Ma. Just give me a minute. Love you.
And this movie has all of that. It's just a lot of fun. It's better than it has any right to be, and an enjoyable film that knows exactly what it's meant to be. And it breezed by, which is something I can't say for some of the more recent Child's Play films. I think the film deserved better than it got. I actually want to see more of this continuity. Yeah, it's a shame Don Mancini isn't involved, but he's still going to have his Child's Play TV series, so why not have both going at the same time? I mean, we have DC TV shows and DC movies. What's the problem with having Chucky on TV and Chucky on the big screen? One of the most flattering things I can say about it is it feels nothing like the original, and that's quite a striking statement when you're talking about a remake, but it works. It's nothing like the original, but they're both excellent in their own way.
You stupid bitch! You filthy slut!
That thing just swore. It's not supposed to be able to do that.
The comedic Chucky films are nothing like the horror Chucky films, but they're all still great.
I didn't hate the Child's Play reboot. Now, I know purists of the series might disagree, but it's at least something different, which is probably more than I can say about the Child's Play direct-to-DVD sequels. I would see more of this series. And it is a shame the creator isn't involved, but it feels different enough where we could have two concurrent Child's Play series. It feels like it's exploring new territory. I think on those grounds alone, it deserves props for being something new and original when it didn't need to be. And I think it also deserves a watch. So check out the Child's Play reboot. It's not as bad as you would think. So what's the future of the series? Well, it looks a little bit uncertain right now because, of course, it's now split in two between the Mancini films and the remake. There's some talk of the original series crossing over with Freddy, which I can't see happening for no other reason than the rights will be a nightmare, and no pun intended. And currently, the Elm Street movies are seemingly done. It looks like the next iteration of Chucky from the original series is going to go to television. Sci-Fi have apparently ordered 8 episodes of a Chucky TV series. But it's going to carry on the continuity of the original series. So I can't say I'm entirely too excited for it. At the same point, TV is a new medium with lots of different things you can do. and enough time to develop where maybe I can get interested in it. I enjoyed the remake because it was original and new. And I'd be interested, if nothing else, because the sequels would have to go in a different direction to the Chucky sequels. But it was a moderate success at best, so I don't know if we're going to get more of this remake continuity. As a whole, the Child Space series actually holds up pretty well. It deserves credit, if nothing else, for trying to do something new and original with most of its entries. Even if it doesn't entirely work, each film feels unique and distinct. Chucky, as well, is a great slasher. He might be one of my favourites. He has a surprising amount of range between horror and comedy. And we also get to see him develop. We have a nice family dynamic. So, while the Child Space franchise in general has its ups and downs, it's certainly deserving and worthy of its cult status, and definitely deserving of a watch. While I'm not entirely sure where the future of the franchise lies, or whether I'm even excited for it, this is a good series for what we got.
Don't ever leave me, please don't say goodbye. I'll be yours till the day that I die.
You stupid bitch! You filthy slut!